The grand ballroom pulsed with soft, classical music and the gentle clinking of champagne glasses. But Liam Prescott stood motionless at the edge of it all, a silent observer cloaked in shadows, his sharp blue eyes locked on the woman who unknowingly ruled his every heartbeat. Scarlett Monroe. She floated beneath the gleaming chandeliers like a living portrait, her silky auburn hair tumbling down her back in flawless waves that shimmered beneath the golden lights. Her elegant satin gown hugging her enchanting figure in a way that made her appear ethereal, as if she had been sculpted by some divine hand solely to torment his longing soul. The soft curve of her smile ignited the room, filling the space with a warmth he craved but never dared to touch. For 5 long, torturous years, Liam had carried his secret affection for her like a sacred wound, hidden beneath layers of duty, family expectations, and a past that clawed at him like a relentless ghost, its cold breath always reminding him of the price of desire. Ever since that night at the charity gala, when her laughter first danced into his ears like a melody written just for him, she had lived rent-free in the quiet corners of his mind, a tender ache that neither time nor distance could dissolve. Yet despite the countless stolen glances, the brushed hands in passing, and the unsaid words that weighed heavy on his tongue, Liam had remained silent, trapped in a prison of his own making, where fear wore the face of his manipulative stepmother, Vivian Prescott. After his father's sudden death, Vivian had seized control of the Prescott empire with ruthless efficiency, turning his world into a battlefield where love was a weakness and loyalty to the family name was demanded above all else. To Vivian, Scarlett was nothing more than a threat, a middle-class girl unworthy of the Prescott legacy, a temptation that could dismantle the carefully constructed empire, piece by piece. Her icy warnings echoed in his ears like venomous whispers. Ruin your life for a woman beneath you, and I'll see to it you lose everything your father built. But tonight, something inside Liam began to fracture under the weight of his suffocating silence. Across the marble floor, Scarlett stood radiant, blissfully unaware of the war raging inside him. She carried herself with quiet strength, masking her private burdens behind that dazzling smile. But Liam knew of the battles she fought daily, the demanding job she held as a marketing manager, the crushing medical bills for her fragile younger sister Emma, the emotionally distant parents who viewed her more as a financial asset than a beloved daughter. Each sacrifice she made only deepened Liam's respect and admiration, intensifying the ache in his chest every time he saw her. And now, watching her forced to entertain Ethan, his arrogant half-brother who wore cruelty like cologne, stirred something dark and dangerous within him. Ethan leaned in too close, his lips moving near Scarlett's ear, as he whispered words that made her smile waver for just a moment before she composed herself with practiced grace. Liam's jaw tightened, his knuckles whitening as his fists curled at his sides, rage and jealousy swirling like a storm he could no longer contain. He could almost hear Ethan's mocking voice, dangling Prescott power like a carrot, trying to charm his way into Scarlett's life for reasons Liam knew were far from noble. And yet Liam stood there paralyzed, the same agonizing questions haunting him. What if she didn't feel the same? What if she rejected him? What if his confession only invited ruin upon her? His love for her wasn't a fleeting infatuation. It was bone-deep, soul-wrenching, the kind of love that made breathing difficult when she was near, and impossible when she was gone. The heavy chandelier lights glittered like 1,000 judgmental eyes watching him cower in his own hesitation as the clock ticked mercilessly onward. But tonight, the weight of his secret was no longer just a burden, it was a breaking point. The painful silence he had buried himself in for years was no longer a sanctuary, but a torment chamber growing colder with each passing second. His world had narrowed down to one fragile truth. If he continued to watch her slip away, he would lose her forever. Not just to Ethan's manipulations or Vivian's control, but to the endless parade of suitors who would never cherish her the way he did, who would never know the depth of her sacrifices or the quiet beauty of her resilience. The invisible wall that fear had built was beginning to crumble, brick by agonizing brick, as Liam stared across the ballroom and silently whispered the desperate plea echoing in the hollow of his chest. I can't lose her to him. I can't lose her at all. And in that singular moment of silent agony, the battle between love and fear surged to its most dangerous edge. The weight of Liam's unspoken love hung heavy in the air long after the painful encounter at the ballroom. But by morning, the simmering desperation inside him finally erupted into resolve. He could no longer stand by as life pulled Scarlett further from his grasp. So with trembling fingers but unwavering heart, he penned the invitation that might either open the door to their future or slam it shut forever. The handwritten note, crafted on thick ivory stationery embossed with the Prescott family crest, arrived at Scarlett's modest office like an unexpected whisper from fate. Resting gently on her cluttered desk amid invoices, client reports, and reminders of the exhausting life she juggled daily. And as she unfolded the elegant parchment, her eyes traced Liam's precise yet vulnerable handwriting, inviting her to a private dinner at Prescott Tower's penthouse lounge. A place reserved for only the most elite, yet now offered solely to her, leaving her breathless with a strange blend of nerves, curiosity, and an excitement she struggled to suppress. For though Liam had always remained distant and mysterious, his piercing blue eyes had often found hers in crowded rooms, sending silent sparks that lingered long after he disappeared back into the shadows of wealth and duty. And now his request felt like a door cracking open to a world she never dared to believe she could enter. As dusk settled over the city and her reflections shimmered in the polished elevator doors ascending to the heavens, Scarlett's heart pounded with anticipation and a gnawing uncertainty she couldn't quite name. And when the doors finally glided open to reveal the breathtaking penthouse, her breath caught, not for the glittering skyline stretching endlessly beneath them, nor for the opulence of the room aglow with soft amber lights, but for Liam himself, standing at the far end of the marble floor, dressed in a navy suit that deepened the intensity of his blue eyes, his posture confident yet layered with a quiet vulnerability that made him appear almost fragile beneath his polished exterior. "Scarlett," he greeted softly, his voice a mixture of silk and restrained emotion, as though each word cost him a fragment of his tightly guarded soul. And as she stepped toward him, the distant hum of the city seemed to fade away, leaving only the sound of her quickening heartbeat and the silent language of longing that flickered in his gaze. They settled at a table adorned with flickering candles and crystal glasses, reflecting tiny dancing flames. The warmth of the setting both intimate and surreal, like a fragile dream. Neither of them dared disrupt too suddenly, and for long moments they spoke in careful exchanges, treading lightly over safe topics while their hearts screamed for release beneath the polished words. Until finally, unable to cage his emotions any longer, Liam drew a shaky breath and confessed, "I've admired you for years, but I was too much of a coward to tell you," his voice quivering slightly at the confession that had lived in the shadows of his chest far too long. Scarlett's eyes widened, her pulse racing with disbelief and an unfamiliar thrill. For though she had secretly harbored quiet admiration for him too, she never once imagined her feelings might be returned by someone so distant from her world. But before she could respond, the sharp ding of the elevator pierced the tender moment like a cruel blade, and out stepped Ethan, his face carved with smug satisfaction, eyes narrowed like a predator sensing vulnerability in its prey. "Well, well, I didn't expect to see this," Ethan drawled with venomous amusement, stepping closer as if savoring the discomfort radiating from the table. And Liam's entire body tensed like a drawn bow as he sharply ordered, "Leave, Ethan!" His voice low and controlled, but trembling with suppressed fury. Yet Ethan, never one to retreat easily, smirked with poisonous delight, his gaze flickering between Scarlett and Liam as he sneered, "You really believe Vivian will tolerate this little affair? She's already arranging your engagement to Vanessa Sterling. You know, the heiress who actually fits the Prescott mold." His words dripping with condescension, each syllable slicing through Scarlett's composure as her face paled and her mind spun in confusion. Realizing she had unknowingly stepped into a brutal power game, she didn't understand, where her heart was nothing more than a bargaining chip on a table ruled by people far more ruthless than she had ever encountered. She felt like a pawn trapped on a chessboard where moves had been made long before she even knew the game existed, and the vulnerability of her position sent a cold shiver through her as Liam's gaze darkened with helpless rage, knowing Ethan's intrusion had shattered the fragile bridge he had just begun to build. Unable to bear the suffocating weight of the moment, Scarlett excused herself quietly, her voice steady but her soul in turmoil, leaving Liam frozen in the glow of flickering candlelight as the door closed softly behind her, sealing his secret no longer within the safety of his own heart, but now exposed to dangerous forces far beyond his control, as the bitter silence of the penthouse echoed with the haunting emptiness of what could have been. The haunting emptiness of the previous night still clung to Liam like a suffocating fog when Vivian's summons arrived, delivered with the cold efficiency that marked every move of the Prescott matriarch. And as he stepped into the sunlit study where she awaited him, her lips curled into a smile that oozed poisonous sweetness, her eyes glittering with the satisfaction of a queen cornering her pawn. "Liam," she purred, her voice deceptively gentle, "the time has come to solidify the Prescott legacy. You are to marry Vanessa Sterling, the perfect match for a man of your station," she declared, her tone brooking no argument, as though the decision had already been carved into stone. Liam's heart clenched as her words echoed through the grand chamber, but his voice, though soft, carried the weight of his agony as he whispered, "But I love someone else," the confession slipping from his lips like a fragile secret he could no longer contain. Yet Vivian's expression hardened instantly, her polished nails tapping against her crystal glass, as her gaze narrowed into icy daggers, slicing through the vulnerability he dared to show. "Love," she sneered, the word dripping with disdain, "is a weakness you can't afford, my dear stepson. You were not raised to follow childish whims, but to uphold an empire your father bled for," she continued, her voice growing colder with each syllable. "Refuse this arrangement, and I will cut you off entirely. No inheritance, no Prescott name, no access to the fortune you so naively take for granted. You'll lose everything and be left with nothing but your foolish heart," she hissed, her mask of civility cracking just enough to reveal the ruthless predator beneath. Liam's mind spun violently, trapped between two devastating paths, one paved with cold security, the other with burning, uncertain love. And as his jaw tightened and his breath grew shallow, he realized how tightly the chains of his upbringing bound him, shackled to obligations he never chose, suffocating under the weight of a dynasty that demanded his soul as collateral. While he battled his private torment, Scarlett's world was crumbling in parallel, her once simple existence now crashing beneath waves of pressure and betrayal, as her parents, having caught wind of Liam's interest, wasted no time in revealing their true colors, their desperation wrapping around her like a noose tightening with every word. "Think about our family," her mother cried, eyes wide with greedy hope, while her father's voice bellowed with sharp authority. "We need his money, Scarlett. Do you want to see us lose everything we've worked for? This is your chance to save us." Their pleas morphing into demands as they pushed her toward a future that felt less like love and more like a transaction she never signed up for. Inside her chest, her pride waged war against her tenderness for Liam, the man who saw her for who she truly was, yet now stood tangled in a web of manipulation and expectation. Neither of them had fully grasped, and as if the crushing weight of their families wasn't enough, Ethan delivered the cruelest strike of all, a fabricated scandal leaked with surgical precision, painting Scarlett as nothing more than a scheming gold digger, hungry for the Prescott fortune, her name smeared across tabloids with headlines screaming lies that twisted her stomach into knots of shame. Co-workers whispered behind her back. Friends looked at her with suspicion, and strangers stared with judgmental eyes as her reputation disintegrated before her own powerless gaze. The humiliation was unbearable, each fabricated rumor carving deeper into wounds she never consented to receive. And as the storm raged louder, Scarlett, overwhelmed by betrayal and hurt, made the agonizing decision to block Liam's calls, severing the fragile line that had tethered them through so many silent longings and near confessions, plunging both of them back into a silence far more brutal than before. This was no longer the gentle ache of unspoken love, but the sharp, cruel quiet of heartbreak, of love dismantled by forces too vicious to fight, as Liam stared at his unanswered messages with hollow eyes. Each failed attempt at contact, a blade twisting deeper into his chest, while the vast chasm between them stretched wider, threatening to swallow everything they once dreamed of. The days bled into weeks, each one colder than the last, as the cruel silence stretched like an endless winter between them. While the fabricated rumors continued to flourish like weeds in the fertile soil of scandal, feeding on whispers and speculations that poisoned every corner of Scarlett's world. And though Liam's desperate attempts to reach her never ceased, countless messages left unanswered, calls that rang into emptiness, and letters returned unopened. Scarlett had wrapped herself in a cocoon of heartbreak, shielding her aching soul from the suffocating storm she no longer had the strength to fight. Meanwhile, Vivian moved with calculated precision, exploiting Liam's vulnerability like a seasoned puppeteer, tightening her strings, summoning elite designers for the engagement gown, selecting lavish venues, and feeding exclusive stories to the press that painted Vanessa Sterling as the picture-perfect future Mrs. Prescott, while Liam stood as a hollow shell of the man he once was, enduring the media circus with a deadened gaze as headlines hailed the forthcoming union as the merger of two dynasties, a triumph of legacy, while his heart quietly bled beneath the carefully tailored tuxedos and forced smiles. Every photo op, every staged appearance with Vanessa, chipped away at him until he could barely recognize the reflection in the glossy magazine covers, plastered across every newsstand, celebrating a victory that felt like his soul's funeral. And as the engagement party loomed like an executioner's blade, Liam's inner torment reached its boiling point, driving him restlessly to the one place where his heart had first dared to dream years ago, the old wooden pier that stretched into the moonlit waters, where the night air once carried Scarlett's laughter like a song only he could hear. The wind whispered through his disheveled hair as the waves crashed rhythmically below, mocking the emptiness gnawing at him, when suddenly, through the misty veil of night, Scarlett appeared like a ghost summoned by his agony, her eyes swollen from countless sleepless nights, her breaths shaky, as though each step toward him cost every remaining ounce of strength she possessed. "I couldn't stay away," she confessed softly, her voice cracking under the weight of emotion she could no longer contain, her vulnerability laid bare beneath the fragile moonlight, while Liam's breath caught in his throat, the sight of her igniting both unspeakable relief and unbearable sorrow within him. He moved closer, his blue eyes burning with fierce determination, his voice barely more than a whisper, but laced with unwavering resolve. "I'd rather lose my fortune than lose you," he declared, as if speaking the words could somehow reverse all the pain that had been inflicted. Scarlett's lips trembled, torn between her desperate love for him and the brutal reality they faced. Her voice choked as she stammered, "But your family," only for Liam to cut through her fears with fierce clarity, his hand reaching for hers as he vowed, "Let them take everything. Without you, I have nothing anyway." And for a fleeting moment, the chaos of the world melted away as they stood inches apart, trembling, the space between them heavy with unshed tears and unspoken promises, their hearts pounding like thunder beneath fragile chests ready to burst. But fate, cruel as ever, refused to grant them peace, and just as their lips quivered on the edge of confession, Liam's phone rang sharply, slicing through the tender silence like a jagged blade, and the color drained from his face as he answered, his voice tight with dread, only to hear the panicked words that shattered the moment completely. Emma had collapsed. The weight of Scarlett's world came crashing down once more, as her sister's fragile health pulled her away like a tidal wave, sweeping her into the night. Her tears glistening under the moon, as she whispered an apology she couldn't bear to say aloud, before rushing into the darkness, leaving Liam frozen on the pier, staring into the shadows where she had vanished, robbed once again of the moment they both desperately needed but could never seem to grasp. As the night surrendered to dawn and pale streaks of sunlight crept across the hospital corridors, the tension that had gripped Scarlett's heart for days finally softened, for Emma's crisis had stabilized, and with her sister resting peacefully, a fragile sense of relief settled over the room. Yet amidst the steady beeping of monitors and the soft hum of fluorescent lights, It was Liam's unwavering presence that anchored Scarlett through the storm. He hadn't left her side since the moment she rushed away from the pier, standing quietly through every tearful moment, offering silent strength without demanding anything in return. His blue eyes never leaving hers, filled with a tenderness that no words could fully capture. And as Scarlett looked at him, this man who had defied his family, his fortune, and the weight of an empire for her, something inside her finally broke free. The walls she had built around her bruised heart crumbling into dust. Her voice quivered as she whispered, "You stood by me when no one else did." Her gratitude laced with all the unspoken emotions that had gathered over years of longing and sacrifice. And Liam, his voice as gentle as a warm breeze, replied softly, "And I always will," each syllable wrapping around her like a protective embrace, dissolving the painful silences that had haunted them for so long. Their hands found each other naturally, fingers weaving together like puzzle pieces finally aligned. And for the first time, laughter danced between them, light and genuine, as they shared quiet memories beneath the muted glow of the hospital's sterile lights. But it was later, under the vast canopy of stars on the hospital rooftop, where the world around them faded into a distant hum, and their hearts finally spoke without fear. The cool night air kissed their cheeks while Liam gently draped his coat over Scarlett's shoulders, his touch tender and reassuring, and she leaned into him, her head resting against the steady rhythm of his heartbeat, drawing strength from its calming pace. In that intimate stillness, as if the universe had conspired to grant them this sacred moment, Liam whispered with quiet certainty, "You're not alone anymore." And his words settled into Scarlett's soul like a long-awaited homecoming. Without hesitation, their lips met beneath the moonlit sky, a kiss that was neither rushed nor desperate, but filled with the weight of years spent yearning, of dreams deferred and battles fought, an unspoken vow woven into that single touch, where love wasn't a fantasy but a hard-earned truth. The world that had tried so mercilessly to tear them apart faded into irrelevance as golden words lingered in the cool air between them. In a world that tried to tear us apart, we found each other in the ruins, and with each heartbeat they shared, the bitter memories of betrayal, heartbreak, and painful silence seemed to melt into nothingness, replaced by the quiet, unbreakable bond that only true love could forge. Yet even as love finally bloomed between Liam and Scarlett, beneath the silent watch of the stars, darkness lurked like a venomous serpent waiting to strike. For happiness in their world was not without enemies determined to crush it beneath their heels. The morning after their tender night, Vivian, fueled by jealousy and a ruthless hunger for control, unearthed Scarlett's rooftop visit, and like a master manipulator, set her final, most vicious plan into motion. A carefully forged web of lies, so intricate it left no room for doubt among those eager to believe the worst. Fabricated documents, forged signatures, and false financial records surfaced overnight, painting Scarlett as a cunning seductress who had not only preyed on Liam's heart, but had also ensnared him in a complex scheme of embezzlement and corporate fraud. Her character shredded by ruthless headlines that screamed in bold, merciless fonts across tabloids and business journals alike. "Gold digger caught." Flashing red and blue lights lit up Scarlett's modest apartment as police pounded on her door, their cold hands snapping unforgiving steel around her delicate wrists, while neighbors peeked from behind curtains, feeding the scandal's wildfire with gossip and whispered judgment. The world that had barely allowed Scarlett to breathe now suffocated her under the crushing weight of public disgrace, her tear-streaked face captured by invasive lenses and broadcasted like entertainment for the masses. While Liam, upon hearing the news, felt his blood turn to ice before erupting into fire as he launched into action with unwavering fury. Within hours, he mobilized the most formidable legal team money could summon, combing through every fabricated detail, dismantling the lies piece by piece with irrefutable evidence that pointed squarely back at Vivian and Ethan, their fingerprints all over the carefully orchestrated betrayal. And when the truth was laid bare, Liam stormed into the Grand Prescott boardroom, the air heavy with the tension of gathered shareholders and flashing cameras as he stood before the empire his father once built. His voice steady but seething with quiet rage as he addressed the room. his piercing blue eyes locking onto Vivian's cold, shrinking gaze. "You're finished," he declared, each word like a thunderclap echoing off the marble walls. "I am cutting ties with you and Ethan forever, severing the strings that had long bound him to their tyranny." The boardroom erupted into chaos, shareholders turning in unison as the weight of the evidence collapsed the Prescott matriarch's iron grip, while Ethan, cornered by law enforcement, was cuffed and escorted away for corporate fraud. His smirk finally wiped clean as his empire of deceit crumbled around him. Vivian's once regal composure fractured, her lips trembling as her voice cracked in a shriek of desperation. "You ungrateful boy!" But her cries were drowned beneath the heavy thud of security's footsteps as she was forcefully removed, her reign over the Prescott dynasty ending not with dignity but disgrace. And as the storm raged around them, Liam turned to Scarlett amidst the sea of flashing lights and restless murmurs, his hand reaching for hers, lifting it gently in front of the world that had tried to destroy them both, his voice strong yet tender as he proclaimed, "This is the woman I love, and no one will ever hurt her again." His declaration slicing through the noise like a beacon of defiance. The crowd gasped, cameras firing like lightning. But for Liam and Scarlett, standing hand in hand amid the wreckage of betrayal, the world beyond their locked eyes faded into insignificance. For in that moment, they were finally unbreakable. As the dust settled from the storm that had nearly torn their lives apart, Liam and Scarlett stepped cautiously into a world reborn, one not defined by power struggles, betrayal, or whispered lies, but instead by quiet healing in the kind of love that had been tested in the fiercest fires and come through stronger, unbreakable. The Prescott Empire, once wielded like a weapon by Vivian and Ethan, had changed hands. And with newfound freedom, Liam made a decision that startled even the most cynical investors. He sold off significant portions of his inheritance, willingly letting go of the chains that had bound his family for generations, choosing instead to build something pure, something meaningful, something that reflected not his name, but his heart. With the proceeds, he founded a charity in Emma's name, a beacon of hope for children suffering from rare illnesses like hers, ensuring that no other family would endure the kind of helplessness Scarlett once carried on her fragile shoulders. Hospitals across the country received donations. Children who had once been left in waiting rooms without answers now found treatments, and mothers wept in gratitude as Liam stood quietly in the background, never seeking praise, only watching the lives bloom from the seeds he planted. And while Liam built this legacy of compassion, Scarlett flourished beside him, not as a woman rescued, but as a woman who had weathered storms and found her own strength, earning respect far beyond what any amount of inherited wealth could offer. Her career blossoming as doors once slammed shut by scandal, now swung open with genuine admiration. Even her parents, who had once seen her as a pawn in their desperate climb for status, stood humbled and changed, witnessing the daughter they had underestimated evolve into a woman of grace and resilience, finally recognizing the quiet courage she had carried all along. Seasons turned, wounds faded into scars that no longer hurt, but served as quiet reminders of their journey. And one golden summer afternoon, beneath the vast stretch of blue sky where gentle waves lapped against the wooden pier, the very place where fate had first placed them in each other's orbit, Liam stood before Scarlett, his heart pounding not with fear, but with a hope so pure it made his voice tremble. The sun bathed the water in brilliant diamonds as seabirds circled above, and a soft breeze danced through Scarlett's silky auburn hair, her eyes sparkling like twin suns as Liam knelt down on one knee, his tailored suit forgotten in the weight of this singular moment. The little velvet box cradled carefully in his hands, trembling, as he looked up at the woman who had become his entire world. His voice cracked slightly as emotions swirled like a rising tide. "Scarlett Monroe," he began, his blue eyes glistening, "will you finally let me spend every day making up for all the years I stayed silent? All the moments I should have reached for you but let fear hold me back?" His words hung tenderly in the air, each syllable laced with a vulnerability that exposed every inch of his soul. And for a moment, time stood suspended, the world shrinking down to the sacred space between them. Tears gathered like tiny crystals in Scarlett's eyes, reflecting the endless sky above, and the man who had risked everything to stand before her, unshackled by wealth or family expectations, only by love. Her voice trembled, but it was steady with certainty. "You never have to make up for anything, Liam Prescott," she whispered, stepping forward as her hands gently lifted his. "You've always been my forever, even when you didn't know it yet."